So my name is Ben Thompson. This is Dixie Stanforth. I'm an associate professor here, actually at Metropolitan State University of Denver, just across the street. So I'm moseying on over this afternoon to the conference. I'm an exercise physiologist certified through ACSM. I've had that certification since 1999. I've gone through a couple of name changes. I'm in the exercise science department over at Metro State. I've been on quite a few committees that kind of govern certification within ACSM. So currently I'm on the Committee on Certification and Review Boards, the CCRB, for the exercise physiologist. So I've been on that. I'm also part of the Committee of Accreditation of Exercise Science, so the accrediting body for exercise science. And for me, certification is really important because the students that I have, ours is an undergraduate only program, and we really prepare our students to be practitioners, and certification plays a huge role once they complete their undergraduate education to get certified in an appropriate certification to help them become employed. So we really encourage our students to have those certifications. So that's kind of just a little bit about me. We were thinking of doing more kind of an informal, if you guys have questions, would probably be more interesting than me just talking about, like I can start going over the Krebs cycle if you want or something like that, but something more if you guys have questions, because you came for a reason. So that's kind of what we were thinking. So I don't know if Dixie's going to come up, tell you guys a little bit about herself, and then we can just kind of go if you guys have any specific questions and ideas, we can start going from there.
Okay, thanks, Ben. And I echo thanks to you all joining us here today. Having a little bit of background might help you frame your questions. I think Ben and I have different stories to tell, and so I won't be Stella. I don't have slides, and I'll keep it short, but I think it might help direct the pathway to some of your questions. So I grew up in Virginia. I went to a small liberal arts school called William and Mary, and when I finished there, I was pre-law until my junior year, and took an anatomy class, and I fell in love with realizing that there was a field that I could move into and grow as a professional. So I changed majors my junior year, and at the end of my senior year, I was certified to teach K through 12, and I was not sure what I wanted to do, and pretty much decided graduate school because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'm old enough that back in that day, exercise science was a relatively new field. And so there weren't a lot of the opportunities that are open to you all today. My undergraduate degree was in physical education. There wasn't kinesiology or exercise science back then. But my first graduate degree was in exercise science, and I was fortunate to go to the University of Arizona and work under Jack Wilmore there. And again, fell in love with this field. And for me, fortunately, because of the timing, it was at the start of the fitness industry. And there hadn't been a fitness industry before Ken Cooper and then Jane Fonda in leg warmers. And the early days of the fitness industry, it was the wild, wild west out there. I mean, most of us didn't know what we were doing. We were making it up as we went along. And it was fun, and yet at the same time, there was a need to do what we in ACSM call bridge the gap between science and practice. And I was fortunate to be one of those early people who had an exercise science background, and so I was doing some research, but I loved teaching, and I loved being able to communicate this information in meaningful ways. And so my earliest days were spent with IDEA, what's now the International Dance Exercise Association. And back then, they were really trying to demonstrate that there was a scientific basis for all of the different things that we were doing. So I was able to get involved in research with companies like Nike and Reebok, and I did step aerobics research, and I did body pump research, and I did jazzercise research, and got to work in answering questions that I felt like we were asking them in the real world, because I was teaching group exercise. There wasn't such a thing as personal training back then, but in group exercise, these were the questions that we were asking, and I wasn't seeing those questions get asked and answered in the exercise physiology labs. So that was my earliest connection with the fitness industry, to blend my love of teaching and research and exercise science and kind of take it all down that same path. And then for me, again, early days, I was fortunate enough to get to work as a fitness editor with Shape Magazine. And then one of the greatest learning experiences of my professional life was I got to work with the Gatorade Sports Science Institute for a number of years. They had boards where they had hard scientists, and then they were looking for some practitioners like me. And so I got to meet with these brilliant people who just, we all read their research and get to connect with them and ask questions and interact with them. And so again, for me, from early days, that connectedness between academia and fitness, and also with industry as well. And so I've been teaching at the University of Texas at Austin since 1985, and teaching is what I love to do. It's what I'm passionate about. And I do some research. I did go back and get another degree in health communication a number of years ago. Having been a part of the fitness industry since its inception, and realizing that, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years and people are fatter and less fit than when we started. What is wrong with this picture? We at UT have an advertising department that has a PhD program. And I happen to know the chair of that department and realized that, you know, advertisers are really good at getting people to do what they want them to do. And they had a health communication faculty in the advertising department. So I went over to the dark side of campus for a few years and got a PhD in health communication, and have since tried to blend my fitness background with the communication piece. And that is kind of where my latter days in this profession have taken me. But it all comes back to teaching and a love of fitness and a desire to kind of help spread that out into the world and see people change their lives, change their behavior patterns. ACSM has been a big part of that, and probably different than Ben. I do encourage my students towards certification, and yet how many of you are in degree programs that you have an undergraduate degree, you have a master's degree, or you have a PhD degree? What differentiates you is your degree, right? That is what really sets you apart. And certification in my world, I've done work with ACSM, I do some work with ACE as well. I feel like the certification industry is one that I think is headed a little bit more towards, for people like this audience, headed much more towards specialization and niche certifications that can set you apart for prehabilitation or nutrition, or really being able to leverage this wonderful degree that you've gotten. And so from our background and our experience, I think we probably tend to make recommendations about certification slightly differently. And so how about if we open it up now to questions and see how we can help you navigate maybe your path, or things that have come up on your journey that you would like some input on. Ben, why don't you come over here, I think, because they want us talking into this microphone. Questions? Yeah.
For the record, I have no idea what I want to do.
Okay. Can I ask you, I think maybe because they are filming this, if you don't mind for your questions, if you wouldn't mind going to the mic so that they could pick that up?
I have explored clinical exercise physiology,
And I was told ACSM certification would go a really long way, but I was also told by just about anybody that I asked that I shouldn't do it yet because they're in the middle of a transition, and if I get a certification, then it might be useless. So do you guys
Okay,
know
why don't
anything
you
about what's
speak
going
to
on
that?
with that, or
Yeah, chime in.
what I should do?
Maybe. Yeah, so the clinical exercise physiology certification may be going through a little bit of a transition because right now it's a bachelor's required. And there's also a master's clinical certification called the Registered Clinical Exercise Physiologist. And there's been a lot of talk about, what's the big difference between the two certifications? What can you do with one? What can you do with the other? And there may be some type of either merging of the two certifications or something like that in the future. Honestly, I don't know when that's going to happen. It's been talked about for a long time, but I'm not sure when. I would really suggest, so are you thinking of going into like cardiac rehabilitation or something like that, or just working in a clinical?
I've been told, I just graduated with my master's in exercise
Okay.
physiology, and I've been told that just going forward in the job search, it's really going to set me apart.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm applying to those, but I'm also applying to things in academia, so.
Okay. I would think, if you're wanting to work kind of clinically or just to put yourself apart, I would take that certification, the clinical exercise physiologist. It's the only clinical certification, well, I take that back. I think ACE has one as well, but the CEP has been around for a long time. It was one of the first certifications that ACSM had, and it's, when I see people looking for jobs, whether it's hospital-based or something, they say, degree required in the field, exercise science, exercise physiology, and a certification. And that certification can be that clinical exercise physiologist is one of the well-known. So I would take it.
Okay.
I would think that if there is some type of change or merging, that there would be grandfathering or something to allow you to keep that certification if it does go to like a master's degree only or something like that. So I would still take it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And I would chime into that. ACSM in that particular niche has the best brand out there. And so when you look at being able to differentiate yourself, and if there is a job, as many of them do have that certification requirement, people are familiar with that certification, and even if they change it, people still know ACSM and they know CEP, and people who are working in the industry are not going to discount that. So I don't think I would use the term useless at all. Nothing's ever wasted. And so when you look at the one that is going to be the strongest brand, it's going to be that one. And even if they make a change, that's not going to shift it. You'll still be able to list it as your certification.
So Dr. Thompson, are you referring to the certified exercise physiologist one, or the CCEP, the old CES? That's what I currently have.
Okay, yes.
So is that the one that's transitioning with the RCEP, or?
Possibly, yes. So,
Okay.
Yeah, they're thinking, and if you've had this clinical exercise specialist, now clinical exercise physiologist,
Yeah.
there would be some transition to where you'd be able to keep that certification. Yeah, you wouldn't have to go and get a master's degree to be able to hold it if they do transition it to a higher degree.
I do have a master's, so that's what
Then
the.
you're fine. Then you should.
Okay, hold on, because there's 3, correct? So the CEP is the bachelor's level. The old CES or the CCEP now is a master's level. And then the RCEP is a master's plus hours, correct? I mean, that's been my understanding of it since I got certified.
Okay, yeah, so I'm sorry, and it could be I misspoke. So there's three certifications that require a degree. So the first one that requires a bachelor's degree is the EPC, the Certified Exercise Physiologist. The next one is another bachelor's degree, that's the Clinical Exercise Physiologist. And then the master's degree is the Registered Clinical Exercise Physiologist.
Okay, that's changed then, since I got certified. Okay, now when I did get certified and got the CES at the time, I was told, the RCEP and the CES, there's really no difference. You can do anything with both of them. So is it becoming more vital and important now to go ahead and get the RCEP?
It really depends in what setting you're thinking of practicing. The clinical exercise physiologist, we see most often in kind of cardiac rehabilitation, kind of stress testing, working in hospital, and along with kind of that environment. The RCEP, those individuals often work kind of more independently on their own, and they work with a wider range of populations. So more than just cardiopulmonary, they may work with people with neurodegenerative diseases or other things like that, as opposed to just kind of what the hospital kind of setting is. So it really just kind of depends on what setting you're thinking that you want to go in. I don't think, if you have the CEP going on and trying to get the RCEP, I don't know how much difference it would actually make. A lot of it is, employers will look at kind of what your experience is in addition to what that certification is that you have.
Right. I have one other question. Will either of those allow you to work overseas, or is there something through an international body? Because to my understanding, ACSM is pretty known internationally, so having that certification will allow you to work, say, in Europe or in South America, or do you know?
That's a good question. I know that the certifications are becoming more widely known, especially in Europe and South America and Asia.
Because that is something I'm definitely considering doing in the next year, is doing some work overseas, probably in South America.
Okay.
And so I just want to make sure that I'm covered, so that what I'm doing is okay.
I don't know if an ACSM certification, kind of like what is defined for their scope of practice, how I'm thinking it would probably apply in different countries. What I would really suggest is wherever it is that you're going, you just make whoever it is that you would be working for kind of aware, what that certification is and kind of what the competencies are that you have, and that's what you can do. I don't think there's anything specific. I know we do have international certification, and so I can ask if you want and kind of give you more information. Do you have any idea about international, Dixie?
We've had students do that very thing, and it really depends, as you said, on where it is you're going to be practicing, because usually the facility recognizes and acknowledges who ACSM is, and they're thrilled that you have that certification, and oftentimes that puts you ahead of others who you might be competing against in that pool. Because it's not licensure, it's a different animal, and so it's a certification, and it's something that really just makes you more appealing as a potential person who could contribute to the work that they are doing. So I think you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so my question is that we all know there are a lot of different certifications out there. And so my question was that when would you recommend a degree or maybe over like a certification? So for example, there are a lot of us who want to meet the exercise with the nutrition. And after talking to my colleague, he wants to go into personal training. He's like, oh, I don't need to go get a degree. I'm just get that certification in nutrition. Now I'm considering doing a degree in nutrition. So like, when would you say, okay, get that degree, or say, go with the certification?
We have these conversations a lot, right? And so much of it is a personal decision. I think a lot of it has to do with what the degree looks like and how the degree is structured. We've worked really hard at having a degree that we feel like the students that come through our personal training specialization, for example, we try to get them to minor in nutrition, things like that. We have it set up that when they come out of an undergraduate 4-year degree, that they are so far ahead of most people who haven't been through a curriculum like that, because they have a good, strong science background, but they also get lots of practical, hands-on experience in the training world. And so I think it depends what the program looks like, because I have friends who teach at schools who reach out and say, we don't have a single practical class. Everything's in the classroom. And I mean, we have a whole specialization where their lab is training people. That's what we do for 2.5 years. And we move them through this pretty rigorous process so that the end product, we can place our students pretty much anywhere we want and be fairly confident that they're competitive with people who have been training for years. But there aren't a lot of programs that are structured that way within academia. So if all you have is an academic curriculum that maybe keeps you in the classroom and isn't giving you some of those tools, I might agree with your friend and say, what do I need a degree for? And that's the downside to a field where we don't place as much value on, in the academic setting, being able to actually give people tools for their toolbox. So I think it would depend on your unique set of circumstances and what the curriculum looked like. I think you are definitely onto something. Nutrition is huge, and I get scope of practice, and if there's an RD in the room, I'm sure that you want to run up here and say, you people are stepping over the line all the time. But I have a personal training business myself, and I see my clients when they're in town 3, sometimes 4 times a week. You're never going to see an RD that amount of time. So in the training world, a lot of times you are the first line of defense when it comes to helping people make good nutritional choices on a day-to-day basis. So if you can get the practical programs, go for it, both nutrition as well as the fitness-based ones. But without that, the certifications have way more value. Because if you have an undergraduate curriculum that isn't giving you some practical tools, the certifications oftentimes are the things that move you into practice and more of the applied information. So look carefully at the curriculums, I think. You want to chime in?
Yeah, and I was just going to talk about scope of practice. So I think it just really, depends what it is that you're interested in. As exercise professionals, there's only so much information that we can give in regards to nutrition and stuff like that. And for us, or for me at least, I think more nutrition is more kind of behavior change as opposed to, you eat X number of calories, this, and this, that's a registered dietitian. What we can do is, okay, what is it that's causing you to eat so many meals or have this, and how is it that I can change your behavior? So I think it really just kind of depends what it is that you're wanting to do and look at. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that did. So my last question would be, if you are a personal trainer, you're in the personal training business, and those both kind of go hand in hand, you always have those clients that says, well, maybe we're not seeing the results we want to see. What else can I do? Let's look at, what you're eating. Would you recommend getting a certification in nutrition? Would that be beneficial for a personal trainer?
Me personally, I would say no. It just, no.
Okay, I'll be the yes.
Okay, so she'll be the yes. So, again, for me, it's whatever the results are that they aren't seeing. With nutrition, there are so many things that go on that, have these physiological processes that as exercise professionals we don't learn about. And I can't imagine that a certification would present that material in enough detail to make sure that, what you're doing nutrition-wise is safe for that individual. And so I would kind of steer away from nutrition certifications, but it just depends. And Dixie's going to be my devil's advocate here. So.
Well, and it's always good to kind of think about both sides of it, because I always look at it as, how many times a day do you make a decision about whether you're going to exercise or not? For most people, once a day, right? how many times a day do you make decisions about what you're going to eat? And, you know, it isn't the same. You know, I can develop a great training program for you, but if your nutritional profile is not matched to that and connected to your goals, exercise isn't going to be nearly as effective in terms of moving somebody towards the outcomes as if I could blend those two things together. And as Ben mentioned, I think more of nutrition in our world is not micro and macronutrients, it's behavioral issues. I'm a big fan of, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this here, of precision nutrition, and Berardi's work I just think is brilliant because it acknowledges the importance of helping learning how to change behaviors. I have a significant percentage of our students who actually go through some of that training just to be better qualified to really be able to help people navigate the nutritional landscape of our lives, which is very different than helping somebody make a decision about an exercise training protocol. So I think nutrition is a big enough piece that if you want to be successful long-term. So in my business, I do in-home training. I don't know how many of you do personal training, but all of my business is based on in-home. It's not training in the real world, I get it. It's a small group of people, most of whom I have trained for many, many years. And we've grown old together. Some of them are much older than me, in their 80s, but I've been training them for 25 years. I've had to learn nutrition and behavioral information. Now, if you're in an academic setting, I think certification, I'm not going to go out and get certified because I'm always trying to learn, I'm always trying to grow, and I'm trying to pull the best information that I can from every source that I can. And so my scope of practice is a little broader because of my background. But if you're just starting in your business, I think recognizing that training is as fun as it is and as great as exercise can be in bringing about change in somebody's life, if you don't address the nutritional piece and if you don't feel confident addressing the nutritional and behavioral piece with them, you may not have them in the long term. And if you want to stay in the industry over time, you've really got to be able to help people with both of those things. So whether it's a certification or you're self-taught, one of the beauties of our field is there isn't licensure. Anybody can do what we're doing, and that's a scary thing, right? It's got its negative sides, but it also has its positive sides in that we get to be lifelong learners who are continually challenging ourselves to learn and grow and take what we are learning and help take that information and use it to help other people. That's really as valuable as studying for a certification, if you ask me. So I think there's value in certifications because it credentials you. But a lot of times, the certification is simply one stop on the journey that lets you put those initials after your name. And I don't know that the certification actually is the thing that sets you apart when it comes to working with people. So I'm saying get the certification, but just because you get certified in nutrition doesn't mean that you've stopped learning about how to help people in that area. It's going to be forever that you're still learning about how to help somebody make a change or make choices differently.
Okay, thank you both.
Mm-hmm. What else? Other questions?
So now I want to talk about the opposite side, the scary part of a
The
lack
dark
of
side.
licensure. Yeah. So I recently got involved in the pole dance fitness movement, and that's kind of an interesting field because really everyone who's teaching it doesn't have any sort of background, educational background or certification in that field. So I'm wondering, as someone who's like been in the industry for a long time, if you have any recommendations on how to move that industry towards some sort of certification that will make it safer for women that are going through that fitness program.
Okay, so I do have some thoughts on that. Back in the day, for me, it was Shape Magazine. You guys, how many of you think Shape does a pretty good job, you know? In the late 80s, early 90s, it was scary, the stuff that they were doing. I probably shouldn't be saying that on tape. But when they reached out to me and invited me to help with some of the editing, I immediately was like, what? And all my friends said, what? Surely you're not going to do that. But when I let myself think about it, I realized, you know, if you want to bring about change, you have to get in there and get your hands dirty and try to help bring about some change. So I think that you're primed to be able to move a segment of the industry towards one that has some higher standards and is able to set some minimum criteria for anyone who might be instructing people in that activity to say, we believe that you need to know at least this, and you have to understand these minimums. And that's how certifications really developed. I remember the first certification committee that I was on, and I was shocked to hear that it was, because I came in, we were supposed to show up with all our questions, and I had all these questions, and they were saying, these are way too advanced. I'm like, what do you mean? This is a certification. And they said, well, that's because a certification is intended to identify minimal competency, that you know this much, this is what we are attempting to demonstrate, and that's our standard. And so if you look at your field, if you look at that group, you don't start saying everybody needs a degree to do that, because everybody doesn't need a degree to do that. And if we're really honest, if we're going to be friends here, some of the most effective people in our industry don't have degrees, and sometimes you wonder, do they really understand the science behind this? But what are they really good at? Motivating people and getting people excited to do what they're trying to get them to do. And so you don't want to dampen and lose that by saying, oh, well, we have these standards up here that the bar is now this high, and if you can't jump this bar, you don't get to do this. So there has to be this middle ground of saying, we've got some minimal standards, and if you can meet those minimal standards, then you are probably, you know, better prepared to work with some of the conditions that you might run into. But at the onset, it's tough because you oftentimes have that charismatic person who has gotten people excited about it, and they maybe need someone like you to come alongside and to really help them go to the next level, which will begin to set them apart and help them do what they are actually trying to do better. I think we just need to be careful that we don't burn those bridges with people who are really good at getting people excited and motivated about exercise and eating well, because a lot of times the science isn't what does it, but you have to understand it to really be effective in helping them. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I'll just add, I'll be the
Yeah.
dampener, so I'm the
Yeah.
exciting one that gets everybody going. The way that I kind of see it is just kind of making sure that people are safe as part of
Yeah.
what certification is. And so ACSM and a number of other certifications have their own accrediting body through the Institute of Credentialing Excellence, ICE. And it's a way that it kind of regulates, what it is that the certification is doing and how it's reflected in the certifying exams. And so that could be something that may be able to give you a little bit of guidance about how to go about the certification process. That's the only thing that I could kind of think of to help get things kind of going.
Okay, yeah, thank you, that's
Sure.
helpful. We just don't want people to fall off the pole and break themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have a degree in exercise science, and so that's one reason when I see these girls that are doing things that are dangerous, that's why I want to find a way to make it a safer type of fitness, because it's already kind of motivating for people, but let's not break ourselves doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of scary stuff out there, right? And we are that voice in the wilderness sometimes saying that, we need to think about this. But I think there's a balance to it. And I think that, if there are any CrossFitters in the room, don't take it personally. But, CrossFit and Orange Theory have done a better job than anybody recently at building community and getting people to work hard and to love what they're doing, because they weren't looking at it just as exercise. And I think we could all say that there's some unsafe things that happen, and there's some scary things going on out there, but we don't want to lose sight of the good that is happening. But it's trying to bring some sanity, basically, into some of the chaos. Okay, should we wrap up? Okay, I think we're wrapping up.
Yeah, so it seems like we've reached a pretty good transition point here.
Yeah.
So if all of you can join me in just thanking our two speakers here before we transition into Dr. Stein. Thank you.